scratch building. And I'm going to build a building called FOXWORTH Enterprises. Before I start, I want to tell a story about Bill Hammer, who used to be a member of this club. And he was an incredible model builder. He was really good. And I asked him one time, how do you get to be a real good model builder? And he said, well, you get a coffee can and you fill it up with marbles. And every time you build something, take out a marble. And by the time you've lost all your marbles, you'll be a good modelist. So there you go. Good advice. This is the building we're going to build here, FOXWORTH Enterprises. It's kind of crude, like a lot of mine are, but I think it turned out reasonably well. A few years ago, I made a big decision. Can't remember how long ago it was now, but I made a big decision to try to have all scratch-built structures on my layout. At the present time, I have between 65 and 68 scratch-built structures. I don't know exactly how many because every time I count, the number comes out differently. And I guess sometimes I count a kit-built building in it, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes I leave out a scratch-built building. But anyway, there are between 65 and 68, somewhere there, scratch-built buildings on my layout now. I still have 16 kit-built buildings that I have not replaced yet. And those of you that have seen my layout know that I have 35 scratch-built flats around the back sides of my layout. 6 of those are at least partially kit. I took parts from old kits that I never built and used them. So most things are scratch built on my layout. I'm just astounded these days at the level of realism people are achieving in this hobby, in this club and in the magazines. It's just unbelievable. The upside to this is that I have many unique structures. You'll never see my structures on any other layout. They're all different. I've been to a lot of layouts on tours at conventions, and you see some of the same structures on layout after layout, but that's not going to happen on mine. And this gives me the fun of designing and building my own structures, which I really enjoy. But I want to add that there's nothing in the world wrong with kit-built structures. I mean, the kits we can get these days are fantastic. You know, we got Walthers, Pike Stuff, Laser Art, JL, Downtown Deco, City Classics, Bar Mills, Blair Line, Fine Scale Miniatures, Campbell, and others. And if I still had all kit-built structures, my layout would probably look a lot better, but it wouldn't be exactly mine. So the downside is, as I say, kit-built structures would probably look better. My buildings look kind of crude. They lack detail. The construction is less than perfect, but they are mine. And I'm happy to have them. I feel pretty good about most of them. Now, the question is, what is scratch building? How much scratch do you have to do to be a scratch builder? This is a station built out of those rectangles you can buy from DPM. You can get them, you know, with all kinds of window configurations, doors, all kinds of different approaches, and glue them all together and you've got a building. Now, is that scratch building? I would say no, that's not scratch building. This building was a kit. It was a warehouse of some kind. I cut out 3 openings on the side so you could see inside, and 1 opening on the end so engines and things could get in and out. Is that scratch building? And I would say, no, it's not. Scratch building for me is designing and building from the ground up using raw materials with a minimum of commercial parts. Pictures of you guys are covering up stuff. but I guess we can still do this. My favorite scratch building right now is wood. I love building with wood. My next favorite is artist board, which I've used a lot, and I'll show you some examples of that. What I hate about it is having to cut out the windows. That's really a chore. My favorite glue is Formula 560. It's called canopy glue, used a lot by model airplane builders. And the advantage of it is if you get it where you don't want it, as I frequently do, it doesn't show up like lots of wood glues will. If there's any residue at all, it's just barely recognizable. It's really good glue. And I was introduced to it at a scratch building conference I went to a few years ago, and I really like that glue. It's great. Commercial parts, yes, I use some commercial parts, as I think most people do, mainly windows and doors, and sometimes roof details, of course. These are my most frequently used woods. I have 2x6s, 6x6s, 2x8s, 8x8s, 2x10s, 10x10s. Why do I use 2-inch wood? Well, I tried using 1-inch, 1x6s, 1x8s, but the strips broke too frequently on me when I was putting them on. So I use all 2-inch wood now, which is unrealistic, but it works better. I also like to use the long chopper. If you have the stop set up like I have it, you can cut a 10-inch piece, as many 10-inch pieces as you want. And of course, you can move that stop up and down the line and cut them any length you want. And I really like that chopper. It works great. Now, this building on the left over here is built with wooden studs and then wood stripping on the outside. So is that building. It's built with studs and wooden planking. This building is built with artist board, and then it's covered with, as already been mentioned today, some of that micromark paper. Those are supposed to be something like concrete blocks, not exactly like concrete blocks, but some kind of block. And they look not too bad up close. This building right here is one of my first scratch buildings, and it's made of all styrene. And again, you have the pain of having to cut the windows out, but finally got them done okay. And so that one's all styrene. I only have one other styrene building on the layout, which I'll show you a little bit later. Okay, these two buildings are a little different. The one on the left is a post office building, and it's artist board with micromark printed siding on it. The other building, which doesn't show up, I couldn't get the lighting to work on that, but it says on the front Railroad Express, and it's studs and wood planking. When I was judged for the structure certificate, the judges want to know which building that loading dock went with. And I said, well, it goes with both of them. They share it. And they said, well, you got to put it with one building for our judging purposes. So I put it with a post office. I figured this other building, all wooden studs, was, a better building than one built out of artist board. So to give the post office a little better chance, I put the loading dock with it. This building here is wood on studs, and there's a story about that. Number of years ago, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I can't remember how long it was, my wife started going to Texas every year and have a 3-day meeting with 11 other women, and the common denominator was they all went through public school together from first grade through high school graduation in the public schools of Edinburgh, Texas. And they've remained friends all this time. So now they get together once a year and they talk for 3 days and then they come home. Well, this building back here was an old building that I redid a little bit. I changed the roof and some other things. And I named it for one member of that group named Betty Gaston, who is a realtor and is into horses. And so on the front, which you can't see, it says the Gaston Building. And this says real estate for your home and for horses. And Sally took pictures of it and showed them to the group. And they said, well, when are we going to get buildings named for us? Well, I didn't feel like building 11 more buildings. So I made use of this one. That's a picture of the group on the top there. And this top sign says Gold Point Apartments. The next sign says for intelligent women of a certain age. And the bottom sign says, are you intelligent enough to live here? That's the idea. So that seemed to satisfy them. They seemed happy about that, they are remembered on my layout. The next building, the focus here is terrible. It looks bad. I'm sorry about that, but that's a dispatcher's office that is all wood and studs, and all the other work on it, except the stairway, is all wood. The stairway is a plastic set of steps that I had on hand. Okay, on these, the gray building over here that I'm pointing to is wood stripping on artist board. I built the main building out of artist board, cut the windows in, and then laminated it with wood strips. So it's kind of a combination of things. These 6 apartment buildings here are artist board with that micromark brick paper on it. And the Salvation Army building here is wood on studs. The other styrene building on my layout is this building under construction. That's all styrene. I was always going to do a lot more to it, and I never did get around to it. This building, whoops. This building, you can't see the sign on top, but it says Tom Bensberg Skyhooks. And my, how do you get that going back up? And the motto for it is, anything go, what is that? The motto is, we put them up there. And so there's a sky hook on the side of the building. That building, my keying is not working here, but I'm using my mouse and it gets moved. That building is all wood on wooden studs. That building is copied from a George Selios book. It's a book, building on his layout. It's not an exact replica, but it's approximately the same shape. And of course, he has a lot more detail on it than I do. And this wooden crossover here is wood on studs. This building is my Union Station at Columbus is artist board on with micromark brick paper on it. Walter Foxworth was a high school buddy of mine. His parents owned a building supply business. And so I built this building in honor of him. Come on. First thing I usually do is cut the wood pieces. Of course, it took more than this to build this building, but I try to measure and figure out pretty close to exactly how much wood I'm going to need, because that stuff's expensive. It's not cheap, and I don't want to have a lot of leftover stained pieces that I can't use for anything. Then the next thing I do is stain the wood, and this wood is soaking in my mixture of alcohol and India ink. About 2 hours is about right for what I want. I found sometimes I've left it overnight and I've discovered it didn't really make it that much darker. So about 2 hours works for me. This is the space I had for the building, 60 by 56 scale feet. This is the design of the building. If you're looking down from the top, if you're flying a drone overhead and you look down, this is the shape of the building. Of course, this part down here is open. And I later added a tower on the back, but that was after I had drawn this. When I get ready to build a building, I get an old piece of Homosote left over from constructing my layout. I draw my plans on graph paper because lining up the studs is much easier when you have those lines on graph paper. And I tape that graph paper to the Homosote base. And then I cover that with wax paper. And I tape the wax paper. I wrap it over the Homosote and tape it on the back. And then I use push pins to keep parts in alignment when I start building. So here is one wall. This is the left-hand wall of the building, and I put the outline in 8 by 8 pieces, stained. And then I'm ready to start adding studs. Here, this shows the wax paper and the push pins that I use. The wax paper is great because, you know, you can lift it right off and it doesn't leave glue on your plans. Now I'm putting the studs in and I'm figuring out where I want the windows. It's a lot easier to deal with windows this way when you could arrange the studs to be the proper width to hold the window and not have to carve them out like you do on other materials. And now I've added some of the siding and installed some of the windows. And now I've done most of the building except this part, which sticks out about, I don't know, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. And there's the finished wall right there. That's another scene of it, a little bit of different lighting. And now I'm going to work on the opposite wall. So I use the same plan. I just don't have this part up here that was on the left-hand side, or don't have that little triangle or that line right there. But otherwise, it'll be the exact same size for the opposite wall. And I start putting down the planks, and you will notice there's overlap at the end. And the reason for that, it's a lot easier to handle the pieces when you're putting them in that way. And of course, after the wall's finished, I trim them off and sand it smooth. So there's the finished building. I mean, the finished wall. And there's the finished wall with a sign on it, FOXWORTH Enterprises. Now I'm starting on the back wall, and you can see where I've decided to put the tower up there. And I've put in a lot of the woodwork and used a lot of push pins and just started the strips going up that wall. I've got to add more studs on this wall because these are too far apart, and put studs. I mean, I've got to build the part that sticks out for the tower. And there's the finished wall with the tower, and I put some signs on it. Got a wonderful picture of my hand up there. This is an interior wall, and that opening is where a loading dock will be. And you can see why it's there. I'm beginning to put the building together. I have to come up with 2 interior walls on each side, and so I've built those, and 2 front walls on each side. Kind of spastic with this mounts, but anyhow, there they are on the front walls. And so I have a pair for each side, a side wall and a front wall, and a side wall and a front wall. Now, this is where I have trouble. And of course, the photograph gives you a little distorted picture of the building. It's more square than it looks, but my biggest problem is keeping things square on a building. I've got a machinist square, or triangle square, or carpenter square, all kinds of other things to help me determine if something's square, and I just never get it quite right. Keeping everything perfectly square is my hardest part. Now I'm building a kind of walkway attic across the top of the two buildings. And of course, they each need a side. And I've got a terrible picture here, out of focus. But I built one wall already, and I'm getting ready to put the siding on the other wall. And you'll notice the windows aren't the same. They're long windows on this side, short windows on that side. The reason is I ran out of tall windows, and nobody can see both sides of a passageway at the same time anyway, so who cares? And you see the messy way I usually do my work. This is a top from a margarine tub, and I put a little dab of glue down and put it on with a toothpick. That's the way I glue things. So there's the building kind of put together now, and we're starting to need to do work on a roof. And I found a really cheap way to make shingles. You go to the garden store and you buy a roll of tree wrap. And I have one of those old shredders that I don't use anymore that cuts it in shreds and narrow strips. Like that. And there are shingles. They're a little oversized for HO, but that doesn't worry me too much because a lot of things I build are oversized for HO. But anyhow, there's the finished building. I put on some roof details. I had that water tower left over from an old kit that I never used it. A couple of vents. I got two windows there that are open, stuck open. That was kind of a delicate kind of thing to do. I've got some vents across the top there. And got some more vents on the back and the little passageway if you want to get up to the roof from inside. And that's the finished building. That's Foxworth Enterprises, for better or for worse. Occupies a nice space on my layout.
Okay.
Thank
you, Bill. Any questions?
That is really impressive. My gosh, that is gorgeous.
Well, thank you. Don't look at it too closely.
I can't get over it. And the idea of using that tree wrap for shake shingles is excellent. My goodness, because I tried to.
Would be perfect, but it's a little big for HO.
Well, it looks great, and the framing. I really like doing that kind of stuff too. On my O scale, I frame up my buildings. The roofs and everything are framed up.
Yeah,
pretty much correctly. My dad was a framing carpenter, and he would beat me if I didn't do it like that.
Don't let him look at my building.
He what?
I said, don't let him look at my building.
Well, I don't. If he looks at that building, it's going to be a miracle because he's been gone since '92. But that I just want to say that is some fantastic modeling. That hats. If I had a hat on it, take it off to you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Good job, Bill. Like it. Thank you.